with me today a wonderful individual. I know you'll enjoy meeting her because she is world-renowned at this point. Today, my guest is Dr. Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin is here to talk to us a little bit about her background, a little bit about autism, and I hope a little bit about community colleges. Dr. Grandin, it is just delightful to have you here.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, and particularly how you chose to go into animal science and what all that means to you?
When I was in high school, I was absolutely horse crazy. I loved horses. In fact, I took care of 9 horses. And then when I was 15, I went out to my aunt's ranch. And that's how I started getting interested in cattle. And what this brings up is you got to expose kids to interesting things to get them interested in interesting things. I was also getting a lot of work skills while I was taking care of the horses and building things. And I'm very concerned today that in so many of the high schools they've taken out the hands-on classes, the auto shop and art and music. Because you take kind of the kids that are kind of different, you know, Asperger's, you know, autism, ADHD, dyslexic, and a few learning problems, they often excel at the hands-on things. And community college is a great place where they can learn a lot of those things that can turn into careers.
Well, we think so too, but thank you for sharing your opinion on that. It's very important. I know that recently there was a movie made about your life, and you talked earlier, or you talked before the movie came out, about how you think in pictures and art. Do you think that the directors of that film did a good job in portraying that? What is your feeling about the film?
I think they did a fantastic job of showing what I was like back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, Mick Jackson, the director, is a visual thinker. Emily Gerson Sains, the mother of an autistic child. I mean, they really did the movie right. And it shows very accurately how I think in pictures. Like when the word shoe is said, I see all these specific different shoes that I've had or shoes I've seen in a store. And visual thinking is kind of a continuum. I mean, some people are extreme visual thinkers like me. When I design a piece of equipment, I can actually test run it in my mind. I thought everybody could test run equipment in their mind. I didn't even realize it was a special skill. But another kind of mind is the pattern thinker. This person is mathematics, music. It's more abstract patterns. And both kinds of visual thinkers sometimes have problems with algebra. I'm finding a lot of people that cannot do algebra, and boy, I'm one of them. But they're able to do geometry and trig.
Because of the patterns in the pictures.
That's right, because it's patterns and pictures. And then you have a third type that's a word mind, and they are definitely not a visual thinker. And then there's different mixtures of minds.
Right. So was that influence, the pictures, did that help you to decide about the animal science, or was it just your close fondness and work with horses and animals that did that?
Well, in order to get interested in animals, I had to be in contact with animals. And I went to a boarding school that had horses. And then I went out to my aunt's ranch, and there were cattle out there. And again, you've got to expose kids to interesting things. I had a graduate student, and she's now a professor at Kansas State University, who had no background whatsoever in cattle and pigs. She came out and got her PhD with me at CSU, and she found out that she liked working with cattle and pigs. But if she hadn't been exposed to them, she wouldn't have got interested in them. And I'm really worried today that in so many of the schools, everything's being taken over by the verbal social people.
Yes.
And they don't. Kids aren't playing outside anymore. Yes. And doing all the fun stuff there is to do outside. Well,
and I know that recently in budget cuts, a lot of institutions have decided to take away some of those very visual things like art and like athletic kind of activities, the hands-on activities. Do you have a feeling about that?
I am very concerned about taking out the hands-on activities, because those hands-on activities can turn into careers. And one thing we don't have enough emphasis on school is, what is your career going to be? And if you expose students to interesting things, they can turn into careers, so they're going to get interested. And I wouldn't have gotten interested in horses if I hadn't been exposed to them.
Sure.
You have to be exposed to them to get interested.
And I know that, for example, in community colleges, a lot of what we teach in our curriculums is relevance, and how relevant it is to what you're studying, so that if you're studying, for example, veterinary science, you actually have to go out and do something and touch something in veterinary science.
Well, I think that's very important. I mean, I advise quite a few students, and I say, I want you to try on your career. I mean, if a veterinarian...
That's great. I like that.
You've got to try on your career. If you want to become a veterinarian, you go out and intern with a veterinarian, make sure you like that. You want to go work out on construction and go out on a construction site, find out if that's what you're going to like to do. You know, it's important to get a career that you're going to like to do. And I'm seeing too many kids graduate from college and they got absolutely no job skills, and they haven't actually tried on their career.
And that's what we hear from our employers too, that they don't have the skills that they need.
Well, no, I think internships are very important. In fact, when I was in college, my mother made sure that I got different internships. I interned at a research lab. I interned at a summer program for autistic kids. I was doing a lot of different things. My science teacher was very instrumental. Oftentimes a mentor teacher get a student turned around. If I hadn't had Mr. Carlock, and Mr. Carlock got an honorary doctorate for the movie, but if I hadn't had Mr. Carlock, I would have gone nowhere, because he gave me the motivation. He said, well, if you want to become a scientist, then you have to study some stuff you're not interested in, like English and history,
yes,
you know, along with the stuff that you're interested in. And you know what I found when I went to college? I took this English literature course. You know, it was kind of a survey course of English literature. Had a great professor. Loved the course.
Wonderful.
You know, one of the courses that I didn't want to take, and I turned out liking it.
Isn't that amazing? Let's talk a little bit about your early life, because at one time I believe I read that there was a doctor who recommended institutionalization. What are your feelings about that for current young people who might suffer from any of those conditions you mentioned earlier?
Well, autism's a very, very big spectrum. At one end of the spectrum, you have somebody who's going to remain nonverbal. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the geniuses out in Silicon Valley. You've got the people that invented all the camera equipment that we've got here. You know, a little bit of autism, that gives you somebody who's kind of a geek and a nerd. They're not very social. And the other end of the spectrum, you got somebody with a whole lot of very severe handicaps. It's a very, very big spectrum. It's like a little bit of autism. Genetics gives you Silicon Valley. I mean, half the people in Silicon Valley would have a little touch of autism. They're running some of the most important companies. But then what bothers me is I go to an autism meeting, and I have a 10-year-old come up to me and he wants to tell me all about autism. I'd rather have him get fixated on his astronomy project, or the fact that he likes Shakespeare, or some other thing, you know, outside of autism. And then I go out to Silicon Valley, and then of course the movie set, there were people on the spectrum working on the movie set, and all I can say is they were not catering, and they were not sweeping the floor. I can't tell you what jobs they were doing, because I don't want to be identifying them. But how do people get into those careers? Well, a lot of people get in kind of the back door. They know a friend who's willing, you know, to try them out. But you got to develop skills. Another thing that I learned on selling my design work is I had to sell my skill and not myself. There's a scene in the HBO movie that I just love that shows one of my drawings spread out on the conference room table. All the guys are around that drawing. And that is actually one of my real drawings on that conference room table. And people thought it was weird, and they didn't want to talk to me. But then I'd show them my drawings. They'd go, ooh, you did that? So you're selling your skill rather than yourself. And yes, social skills are important. And I think a 50s upbringing helped me, because in the 50s, social skills were just drilled into kids.
Yes, they were. You've mentioned the movie set. I know you were probably on the movie set for your life story, but did you have something to do with Rain Man? When Dustin Hoffman played that? On
Rain Man, I spent a 3-hour lunch with Dustin Hoffman where I talked about what it felt like to be autistic, problems with touch sensitivity, sound sensitivity, problems with being constantly anxious and nervous all the time. He had some other consultants to show him what autism looks like. I was the one that helped him understand what it felt like. Now, I was in a constant state of fear all the time. When puberty hit, terrible panic attacks and anxiety. And the movie, HBO movie, shows me before I took antidepressant medication. Antidepressant medication in low doses, and I got to emphasize low doses.
I understand.
Because if you take too much Prozac, you're going to be agitated and have insomnia. But just the right amount. can really help us visual thinkers not be so nervous. Just little tiny doses. I know non-autistic visual thinkers that take a little tiny dab of Prozac in the morning, and it gets rid of that constant anxiety.
So you seem to have no qualms, no fears, no apprehension here today. Is that something that you learned?
Yes. The very first talk I ever gave in graduate school, I had to take over a class, and I panicked and I walked out. And I can remember my first talks. And one of the things that saved me was I had really good slides.
Good.
You know, and that's really important. I know some of my students, when they present their first papers in animal science, they're really, really nervous. And I said, let's make sure you have really good slides. And it's only a 10-minute talk for an animal science meeting. And if you panic, you can read your slides. It won't be the end of the world. Everybody there knows you're a student giving, you know, your first or second talk.
And then reinforcing the visual piece of it also.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And when I started out my cattle handling talks, I had all kinds of fantastic slides of, you know, things that make cattle walk. Shadows, reflections, a coat on a fence. I showed facilities built right, facilities built wrong, and then explained it. Being a visual thinker, my talks were all pictures. They didn't even have any word slides.
Right, right. Tell me, Dr. Grandin, what's the best thing that you have going for you now? What do you like the most about what you're doing?
Well, right now I'm 63 years old, so I'm kind of at a point in my career where I want to pass knowledge on and work with students. I've had a number of students who got their PhDs and their masters with me. I want to make sure they get a good education and they get into good jobs. I feel very strongly about getting students placed out in really great jobs. Lily is the assistant professor of animal science at Kansas State. Kurt's working up at the University of Wisconsin River Falls. Wendy Fullwider is animal husbandry specialist for Organic Valley. And Jennifer, one of my other students, she works for the World Society for the Protection of Animals.
Wow, that's quite an impressive list. We need to finish up here very quickly, but before we do, I want you to share with us, because I know there's lots of people who are going to be watching this, what's the best advice you could give to people, individuals, or their parents when they discover they have a condition like yours? What would you like to say to those folks?
That's almost too general. First of all, I've got to look at age.
Okay.
If you have a 2 or 3-year-old with no speech and all kinds of rocking and repetitive behavior, nothing's the worst thing you could do. You got to get 20 or 30 hours a week of intensive one-to-one teaching with an effective teacher.
Okay.
And if you're in a situation where there's no services, grandmother or a student will work. The secret is keeping that kid engaged. Turn-taking, playing games, nursery rhymes, teaching them words. Okay, let's get up on somebody that's more like me. Let's say you take the kid who's now in elementary school getting teased. You know, this is the kind of geeky kid where a good teacher can help turn him around. And he's also going to get social interaction through shared interests. Some of these kids have done just fantastic in scouting. I've been getting quite a lot of emails about, well, my kid made Eagle Scout because it's a real structured type of thing. The other thing is developing job skills. And people on the spectrum tend to get fixated on things. Well, you use those fixations. Like in the movie, it showed when I saw this optical illusion room. Well, I got fixated on making that optical illusion room. Well, that helped to foster an interest in science. I think we have to be thinking when kids get around middle school, well, what are they going to do when they grow up? And what I'm saying doesn't apply just to Asperger's and autism. It also applies to ADHD and dyslexia, people that might have some learning problems. Figure out exactly where the strength is. You know, if somebody's good at art, then let's figure out how we can turn that into a career. Take some classes in graphic design, learn how to do animation. Or some of the visual thinkers, they make fantastic auto mechanics.
They do.
And then your pattern thinkers, your math minds, engineers, computer programmers.
Excellent. Well, I have enjoyed our meeting, and I will tell you that you have become quite a notorious person in every good respect that there is. And we appreciate your taking your time out to be here for this show and also to speak to our students at Human to Human. I'm sure that we'll have quite a large audience there.
Well, thank you for having me.
Very nice.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.